It is Monday, August 4th, right here on your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. And this is presented to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. And this is All In Horns. Jake, first weekend of padded practices kind of got underway as we were reviewing days 1 and 2 of the practice session here going into fall camp as we approach Ohio State. We're in August, and game 1 against Ohio State in Columbus, August 30th. I mean, we are within a month from game day, and so things starting to ramp up here. Things starting to ramp up on the practice field as well. And we're going to discuss what the reports have been. Obviously, we don't have access to practice. We're obviously not out there watching practice each and every day to give you these reports, but it's just what we're reading from insiders and people who have attended these practices. We'll give a little bit of an update on Ryan Wingo and DJ Campbell's kind of absence from last week's practice. A couple of preseason award watch list nominees that we're going to just briefly mention, getting into how the defense might have the offense's number at least early into the camping session, and then just the intensity of practice overall. But Jake, did you have a good weekend? How's your weekend going? And yeah, just we're each day, it's just an X on the calendar, just getting closer and closer to that regular season.
Yeah, but the X's start to get slower this time of year. This is the wait between the start of fall camp and game 1 of college football is the longest wait. And, you have a little preseason football sprinkled in. That gets old pretty quick. By old, it doesn't mean I don't watch it, but you start itching for actual games more than anything. And so yeah, kind of to that point, but I'm excited, and it's nice to kind of start to get some practice reports to talk about. And hopefully we keep getting likes, subscriptions, which are free, by the way. All you gotta do is click that little subscribe button, and leaving some comments. We've been seeing more and more growth, and hopefully we keep growing as we start to get prepared for this Ohio State game. I know we've talked about it previously, but this is the biggest week 1 game that we can remember in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, Texas and Ohio State have faced off against one another in the past. Obviously, it was the season that Texas ended up playing and winning in the national championship game. But and people maybe put that game as great as the Texas USC matchups have always been. Texas Ohio State, they in terms of non-conference games, they always they never disappoint. And so I'm looking forward very much to seeing Arch Manning lead the team out as a first-year starter, and kind of what this team is looking like. I was been watching, a couple of videos and stuff, but I mean, this is my sentiment as well, is that this is year 5, and every guy in this locker room is Sark's guy now. And so now it's the time where the pressure of being and competing for a national title year in and year out, this is when it's supposed to start coming together for Sark. Jake, you and I, we've put that, that 3-4 year window on the previous coaching eras, whether that be Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, or whoever. But you give your coach 3 to 4 years, let them get their guys in. Sark obviously has not disappointed. If anything, he's exceeded any type of expectation that has been put on him. But I'm just saying this year it's his guys. It is Sark's full 100% team now, and so I'm very excited to kind of see what the identity of this year's team is. Last year's team, a little bit of a mixed bag when it came to the offensive side of the ball, but on the defense side of the ball, it maybe we've never seen as good of a defense as we put on the field last season.
Yeah, which is interesting because Sarkisian is such an offensive-minded head coach, and it shows with the last year the problem for the offense was really just finishing with touchdowns. They put up a ton of yardage, it felt like every game, but didn't result in enough points, and I think a lot of that will be alleviated by certain aspects that'll change with the offense this year. But a lot of offensive coaches tend to have troubles getting a great defensive side of the ball. But I love that Sarkisian has shown that that's clearly a focus. He obviously nailed the defensive coordinator hire in PK, and it shows too that he made a hire that he didn't necessarily go out and try to get just the biggest name on the market, but got a guy that he felt like would stick around. And now it's year 5, and he's got the same defensive coordinator. That's pretty rare for, especially for a guy who's had as much success as PK has had at Texas. You feel like he's very underrated on a national level, especially. It feels like the fan base finally started to give him more love last year. Only took him having the best defense in college football.
Right.
But I think the defense is going to be special again this year. The question will be, can the offense match the points to the yardage output? Because putting up yards was never an issue. But special teams can help with that as well, as we've talked about when it comes to field position. Because like we talked about, 40, 50-yard drive not ending in points because you're at midfield at that point can flip points as well.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a perfect segue into Bouwmeester and Mason Shipley both getting put on the preseason watch list for the Lou Grasso Award, which is the best kicker in the nation. So Mason Shipley put on that watch list. And then the Ray Guy best punter in the nation award will go to Bouwmeester. And so Bouwmeester. And so, yeah, I mean, the fact that, and you and I, we were talking, we're like, it's very possible that Bert Auburn was put on that Lou Grasso Award watch list the beginning of last season. We saw how that turned out. So that doesn't really mean much of anything other than the expectations and what we've seen in previous seasons from these two guys who were not wearing the burnt orange and white and on the 40 acres kicking for their respective teams a season ago, what they're carrying over into this season for Texas. And then obviously the national spotlight of being at Texas and being able to perform for Texas. Now, hopefully in a perfect world, we don't really use Bouwmeester all that much, and Texas is constantly getting into field goal range at least, and then putting points on the board. Obviously, that's a perfect world scenario where it may not be necessarily likely, but just something to kind of, if you think that Jake and I are just spewing smoke and mirrors when it comes to, the special teams and the importance of these two additions on this year's team, obviously the nation is also responding as well of the importance of these two guys on the roster by putting them on the watch list.
And just wait for week 1, because an offense in week 1 never looks, in college football, very rarely looks put together. Texas's offense is going to be dealing with a multitude of factors going against it. A, it's going to be week 1. B, most of the offense is different from last year. You got a pretty much a brand new offensive line. And you're on the road at one of the loudest places in the country week 1, that is banner day for them, essentially.
Yep.
So, a lot of things going against the offense week 1. If you think, Bouwmeester is not going to hopefully make a huge difference week 1, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to come week 1, because I think that is going to be similar to the playoff game in some ways. I think it's going to be very low scoring. And I think special teams could make a big difference. I think it's going to be special teams and explosive plays that will decide that game, and who wins or loses. Obviously, turnovers as well.
Right, and I was going to throw that at you as well, as the turnover game. If Texas can hold on to the ball and not turn the ball over and give Ohio State good field position, and then vice versa, if Texas can force a couple turnovers on what otherwise may be a scoring drive for Ohio State in Texas territory, and Texas comes up with a turnover, huge, absolutely huge, and turning points in the game. But you did mention that. Hey, Jake, a quick update on Ryan Wingo and DJ Campbell.
Yeah, so it's been weird because the team said kind of personal issues, reports kind of followed that, and then reports started coming out for the weekend that were basically maybe not personal issues, some type of small, very minor ailment with both of them. That obviously those are two names that they're Wingo isn't necessarily as proven of a quantity when it comes to production on the field. I think within the program, he's considered a pretty proven quantity, though. And if their pinky is sore, they're probably going to be resting right now. If it was game week, I imagine they would be out there. But based off what everything we've read from sources that are typically reliable, is that there's nothing to worry about. It's very early in camp. You're going to be very precautionary with big-time players.
If they're having cramps, if they're not feeling well, they're feeling a little lightheaded, a little heat stroke action, I don't care what a little dehydration, You let them go in the
Tom
locker
Herman
room.
P charts.
Yep. Start charting those P charts, get an IV in you, get some pickle juice in you, whatever you got to do. But yeah, I mean, it could be a multitude of things early on in camp season. That's where you get the dehydration stuff. That's where you get the cramping. That's where you get, those types of things. And so it could be a stomach virus or something along those lines. You hope it doesn't spread to the locker room, but it could be just a little bit of a sickness and the team didn't want to report, a student's, health situation in terms of being sick or not. So so many different things. Again, obviously, it has come across that it's not overly serious. And so just probably something Jake and I are going to monitor going into this week, Monday through Friday. Hopefully they get back on the field and they're good to go by the end of this week. All right, Jake, we talked a little bit about defense. We talked about the importance of it, especially come week one in terms of turnovers. But the defense may or may not be getting the better of the offense, at least early on in these padded practice, which is, again, I think it's a lot of you're much more experienced on defense than you have the experience on offense. You and I, we've talked about it all offseason. I think it only makes sense that early on in camp, the offensive roster still trying to digest that playbook, still learning the playbook, learning how to play with one another. The experience on one side of the practice field compared to the other side of the practice field, vastly different. And so I think this defensive crew probably already has their stuff together when it comes to assignments and communication and all those things. They're going to look much more cohesive at the beginning of practice and camp than the offense, but all reports saying that the defense looking pretty good so far.
Yeah, also you have some shuffling at the offensive line with an already new offensive line. Then having to shuffle it up more with DJ Campbell sitting out. That
The
makes
only
a
one
difference.
that's really experienced.
You're only Cole Hudson's very experienced, but center's a new position, though he's been bumped out to guard, and Robertson in, as we talked about last week with Campbell out. But it's just very normal for defenses to win camps early. At pretty much every school other than maybe Oklahoma when Lincoln Riley was there. And I think we know why that was the case. But yeah, now USC. But not anything surprising to me reading that. What I did like to hear was the defense just seems to be having a little bit more of a knack for creating turnovers than even last year. And some of these young guys making plays in practice. Warren Robertson was a guy that I read had 2 picks on Saturday. These aren't all coming off Arch Manning, by the way. Don't start for I could see your face. I could see it's the no-win situation, right? Defense looks good, offense sucks.
So
Stalemates, they both suck.
Are you telling me that Arch Manning is turnover prone and is going?
No, it means that Texas doesn't have a backup quarterback, which we'll get into tomorrow. But they must all suck.
But everyone has turnover problems on the offense. Yeah,
in 11 on 11, the defense is winning. Is kind of the gist of everything that I've read. Not a surprise, but
also not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, a very normal thing. And I have read things that have complimented Arch on his ability to take care of the ball. So I don't think it's all on. It's definitely not all on the first team offense. It's hard when the media isn't viewing the practices, fans aren't viewing the practices. You just got to go by the little tidbits you get. But it seems like a lot of people inside the program are very high on this defense not dropping off from last year's, which if they don't drop off from last year, it's going to be, Texas is going to be a really hard team to beat again. Cause when you have a defense that is that good, and then you have an offense that's, only going to get better as the year goes on, it'll make Texas a very hard team to beat.
Now, you and I, Jake, when we were, going over through the draft and into the offseason, transfer portal, all the things leading up to this point, a question that you and I both had was, without Jahdae Barron on the defense, where do these interceptions come from? With Andrew Makuba in the NFL draft going to the Philadelphia Eagles, where does the interceptions and the turnovers come from at least the secondary? Now, obviously, you can have a Colin Simmons putting pressure on the quarterback, strip sacks, Anthony Hill also involved in turning the ball over when it comes to in the run game and other things like that underneath stuff. But whenever it comes to over the top, down the field, where are those interceptions coming from? Obviously, you still have Michael Taft back there, but everybody else rather unproven when it comes to turning the ball over. But that's not to say this can't be a by committee thing where Kobe Black has maybe an interception, where Littleton maybe gets a forced fumble somewhere along the line. Malik Muhammad gets a couple picks. Jelani McDonald, Derek Williams, all involved. Gilbo involved somehow, some way throughout the season where they're maybe not getting 7 interceptions for one player, but 4 players make up the 8, 9 interceptions or whatever you have, throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I think in the secondary it'll be that. I also just think this front seven is going to cause a lot of
I
turnovers.
think so too.
Whether it be strip sacks, whether it be just putting pressure and causing an inaccurate pass.
Yeah.
And then one of the secondary guys makes a play. But like I had mentioned just a couple minutes ago, Warren Robertson's name popping out and getting a couple picks in a practice. He's a guy that I know that the staff is very high on and expects to be hard to keep off the field this year. Just keep reading more and more. And this is where we're getting to some of those really top classes Sarkisian has brought in, starting to become sophomores, juniors, seniors.
Yep.
And some of these younger guys that are sophomores or juniors, but haven't seen the field much, are making it to where they're still second and third on the depth chart, maybe, but they're going to be really hard to keep off the field.
And I think the rotation is going to be very common on defense, Jake. I think it's going to be more common that we see a fluid rotation of guys. So that when we say starter, when I say starter, that means like on your athletic program when you go sit and take your seat in the stands and you're looking at the starting roster and they just have a guy named. In terms of snaps being played, I don't. It's going to be very blurred lines of who a starter is and who isn't a starter on this defense, other than Anthony Hill, Michael Taft, Colin Simmons.
Those 3 will lead the team in snaps. Manny Muhammad as well.
Yeah.
Those are probably your 4 cornerstones of just they're not going to be off the field very often. I wouldn't be surprised if Jelani McDonald is up there in snap numbers.
Yeah.
The defensive tackles are going to rotate constantly. The edges, even Simmons will rotate out, especially early in the season.
Yep.
Ohio State, you may think, well, they're playing a really good team week 1. Well, it's week 1 in conditioning. It's not a night game, so it's probably going to be a little hot. They're going to have to rotate players against Ohio State. Also, he has made it obvious that he wants to play the long game with these seasons. Yep. They rotated a lot against Michigan. Gibson got a ton of carries against Michigan, and his carries started to rattle off as the year went on. They're going to rotate a lot of players, even in the Ohio State game. And then as they get into what should be very easy wins leading up to conference play, I imagine they're going to be trying to get people as much rest as possible because you need to be ready to go whenever your first 2 games of SEC play are at Florida, and then you get Oklahoma. And I believe, by the way, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think Oklahoma is coming off a bye against Texas, whereas Texas is coming off a trip to the Swamp.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, when I briefly looked at the schedule,
I'll have to take a deeper dive into OU's schedule, but it's a great point you make, Jake. And here's the thing too. People are going to have that video game mindset of why doesn't Colin Simmons have 4 sacks against Sam Houston State, or why doesn't, which he very well could, but he also might only play 20 snaps total in that entire game. Like these guys aren't going to be playing a ton. They're going to be more like preseason reps when it comes to Anthony Hill, Taft, and those guys, Manny Muhammad, playing against San Jose State and Sam Houston State and the likes of that stretch between Ohio State and Florida.
Yeah, Oklahoma does not come off a bye, but they essentially do. They're playing Kent State the week that Texas plays Florida.
Yeah.
So very different opponents going into that Cotton Bowl. And so just all that to say, keeping players fresh even early in the season is going to be very pivotal, especially when you open up SEC play with those 2 games, because we know that whenever there's a blowout one year in the Red River, the next year is typically not a blowout.
Yeah. As we approach closer to the regular season, Jake and I are probably going to be doing an expectation or a prediction episode, if you will, leading up to where Texas could possibly be at possible points of the season and kind of our expectations for the year. And then we'll probably come out with a second episode to that of our final predictions of how the regular season is going to go. And that'll probably drop the week before the Ohio State game, or maybe even the week of the Ohio State game leading up to it on maybe Friday or Thursday. I don't know, but one way or the other, we'll figure out when we're going to do that. But just a little sneak peek. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Texas has 2 losses going into OU and desperate for a win at that point.
It's not impossible. I mean, that is a bad scenario, but when you have Ohio State on the road and Florida on the road all before the Cotton Bowl, those are 2 very losable games.
Yep.
I mean, especially with Florida,
a first-year starting quarterback and an offensive line that hasn't really worked well together. Worst case scenario, I'm saying Texas is 3-2 going into that that Oklahoma game, fighting for their life to stay away from 300 6 weeks into the season.
well, and essentially your playoff hopes not maybe gone, but very possibly gone.
You'd have to have one SEC loss clean throughout the rest of your SEC schedule, including Georgia, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and then maybe, play fairly well in the SEC championship game or win the SEC championship. I think a 3-loss Texas team, if you had Ohio State, a Georgia loss in the regular season, and then an SEC championship loss, I think you're a top 12 team. But I think that's the scenario you're going to have.
Yeah, I mean, it involves you either having 3 losses and winning an SEC championship game or having 3 losses with one of those being a loss in the SEC championship game. Yeah. Those are the only scenarios, especially just based off last year. I mean, Alabama didn't get in just off of name recognition.
And you can't drop against Kentucky. You can't drop against.
No, and you can't avoid. Yeah, you have to avoid, and they go to Kentucky. Yeah. Georgia almost lost at Kentucky last year.
You can't drop Arkansas at home. You can't afford to do that with the schedule Texas has this year.
Yeah, and so just all to say, Texas's schedule, I think we both agree, is much harder this year on paper. When you consider going to Florida early in the season, a Florida team that should be much better than last year, and Texas got a banged up Florida at home in that game. Going to Ohio State. I think Ohio State's probably going to be much better than Michigan was last year. You go to Georgia instead of having them at home. And then OU should be a much better team this year as well. In that game, like I just said a bit ago, whenever it's a blowout one year, it's typically very close the next year. So you imagine that game is probably going to be a little more stressful this year. Yeah. And then combine that with all the young factors. We're not saying this team can't. This team, we've said it, they have a very high ceiling, probably a higher ceiling than the last 2 years teams. But you feel like that floor is also probably a lot lower than the last 2 years.
Jake, you're looking at worst case, hit the panic button, worst case scenario, 7-5 this year. I mean, I can give you 5 losses on their schedule right now.
It's not. That is the worst case scenario. I think injuries would have to be the case for them to lose that many games. But we've seen that
Ohio
happen
State,
to teams.
Florida, Oklahoma, Georgia, A&M.
Yeah, I mean that to me is like the absolute floor worst case scenario. That's around where the record would be. But also, I think the ceiling is 12-0. They just win every game. Absolutely, and so
absolutely.
My final prediction will probably be somewhere in between there, more towards the ceiling than the floor. I don't think they're going to be a bad team this year. No. But the schedule is just the way it plays out. We knew the schedule would be harder this year because of the road games.
Yeah.
And if you look at the home schedule outside of A&M, there's not really any home games to get that excited about. This is a horrible home schedule this year. Yeah. With what it's the, cupcake non-conference teams are all the home games. Ohio State's on the road. You have Arkansas and A&M. I don't think the Texas fan base, the older ones do. Most of the ones our age, even a little bit older than us, and then obviously younger than us. Do Arkansas like Arkansas fans view Texas?
Arkansas got this year. They're not the same team they were last year,
and they weren't that great of a team last year.
They've got Taylor Green,
who is good. I thought watching him play, I thought that's one of the better quarterbacks Texas played. He didn't have a great team around him, which hurt them a lot.
Have a worse team around him this year. So, hey, Jake, let's go ahead real quickly. Practice reports stating a little chippiness, getting a little physical between the offense and defense. I know we just started the practice fall camp, but you get tired of hitting each other. Obviously, the competitive juices are there. Jake and I are kind of on the same page with this. You kind of want the chippiness and the competitiveness. You want that fire whenever you're going against your teammates, but you also want your coaches to also say, line up, run some gassers. That's unacceptable. You're not going to be able to do that in a game. We're not going to be able to do that in practice. But I think as coaches and fans, you also don't mind reports of fighting in your camp, as long as it's not every day and it's not just like egregiously violent and it's between, the same guys every single time. Cause then you're like, we might have a little bit of a locker room issue. But other than that, it's football. It's competitive. It's what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it, but I'm also glad the coaching staff stepping in and saying also unacceptable.
Yeah, I feel the exact same about it. And, from also with college football, you get the interesting niche of they just also had spring practices not that long ago. So it's not like they just started hitting each other. They've
Yeah,
been competing, and now there's a bunch of summer workouts. I don't understand how it works, but the coaches get to work with the players a little during the summer. There's a lot of competition during the summer between the players. So they're competing it. You get out of football season, and for Texas, football season has been running late lately, which is a good thing. But then you don't really have that long of a break before it's time for getting ramped up for spring. You start competing against each other. Then you have spring, and you're constantly hitting each other, competing against each other. And then after spring, you're competing against each other all summer now, because summer isn't just an off time like it used to be anymore in college
right.
football. Then you get into fall camp. So by the time you're in fall camp, and you see that kind of light at the end of the tunnel that is the start of the season, I imagine the emotions are running higher now than they would have 10, 15 years ago, when the football schedule was a little bit more lax than it is now.
Also, by the way, these guys are probably just as excited to play Ohio State as we are. Like, they're just chomping at the
More,
bit.
they're more excited. I
They're
mean,
they're just chomping at the bit to play like real life football. And so
and
they're
it's the team that ended their season last
yeah,
year, which only adds emotion to it. And a lot of these players were on that team last year. And Sarkisian has talked about how this team does not like to lose, and there was no like, well, we made it to the semifinals.
yeah.
With this roster, they all come from, a lot of them come from championship programs in high school, and they expect to win championships. And last year they did not win a championship, whether it be conference or national championship. And so I imagine most of them felt like last year's season fell completely short.
They won a Sugar Bowl. They got to celebrate a Sugar Bowl win, and that was, or Peach Bowl. Sorry, Peach Bowl. Right? Is that what it was? Peach Bowl.
Uh, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
because it was in Atlanta.
Sugar Bowl's in New Orleans. Yeah, that's my fault. But yeah. All right, Jake. Well, that covers all the topics that we wanted to hit. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Again, like, share, and subscribe. I know Jake already hit on it earlier in the episode, but just want to bookend it. If you've made it this far in the video, there's no reason for you not to hit subscribe. Completely free to do so. Give us a like. Interact with us in the comment section. We try our best to actually engage in conversation with you in the comment section. If you have any questions, we also address some of those conversations on the airwaves as well. So let us, be as involved with us as you want to be. But with football season right around the corner, we're expecting big time things out of this podcast, and we need you guys to do that with us. So for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. As always, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.